Hello and welcome to our series on prayer. My name is Abraham Quinones. I'm a pastor here in the city of Dallas, Texas, and today I'm being joined by Trevor Jamieson, who is a teaching pastor here at Cliff Temple Baptist in Oak Cliff. Trevor, can you just take us through why we're putting this prayer series together?
Yeah, we wanted to look into what prayer is by investigating scripture and Christian tradition, right? And I think a lot of people are taught growing up that prayer is a sort of laundry list of things that we bring before God.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfectly legitimate way of approaching God, but hopefully we'll discover through this series that that's just the tip of the iceberg.
So let's jump right into it. This first week, we're looking into the Old Testament, and that's a big place to start at when we're looking at prayer. Can you just take us through why we're starting there?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Old Testament is 39 books. It's too much to cover.
Yeah.
But what I propose we do is we start and look back at the very beginning in Genesis.
Okay.
In Genesis, we all know how the story goes. God creates the world and everything in it. And after creating humanity, he creates a garden. And we are told in the scriptures that God walks with us in the cool of the day in the garden of perfection. It's a beautiful picture of what harmony we had with God and with creation. I think this gives us an idea of what prayer is in its fullness, right? Perhaps that impulse in you to cry out to God in your most trying time comes from this deep-seated knowledge in your soul that we were always created to walk physically with God in the garden.
That seems so right to me because even in the garden, when we see that Adam and Eve disobeyed, and we see that the relationship they had with God was fractured on their end, God still came and sought after them and looked for them in the garden. So it seems right to me that even at that point in time in the relationship between man and God, there's a component of faith that is still there.
That's right. And you know that fracturing ended up being this one-way fracturing, and so that we see God start to pursue humanity after the fall. And so when we look forward in Genesis and pick up with Abraham, we have a time where there maybe was some stories told of Yahweh, but not a lot else. There was no Bible, there was no Jewish tradition. And so notice what happens. God shows up, he speaks to Abraham. Abraham says, okay, I'll do it, and then does it. Over and over, Abraham shows this incredible faithfulness to follow after God. And notice at this point, prayer is God speaking to us, not the other way around. And somehow, Abraham's faith is such that we get this picture of how this garden relationship of Adam and Eve shows up in the midst of a messy and broken world.
Wow, it really seems like prayer is really listening to God and having the faith to do it.
That's right. And, you know, we even see it develop beyond just one person. God eventually adopts this whole family and eventually a whole nation. And this relationship isn't just even one between this God and these people that follow him. He allows it to be this relationship of a father and his children. Again, God is striving for intimacy with us if we're willing to come before him, unlike Adam and Eve did. And so what we see in this relationship with his children is his children are passionate and emotional. They cry out through raw honesty and painful tears and passionate praise. Prayer becomes a ritual, but one filled with emotion.
So it really seems to me like prayer is a passionate engagement with God in his presence. And it seems right to me that God, throughout all the Old Testament, continues to speak to his people as a father does to his children.
That's right. And like children, right, we grow in our knowledge of how to speak to God. Remember back with Israel, they kind of acted like children in the desert, right? They threw temper tantrums. They had a little scuffle with God for a while, but that's okay because they were learning how to speak and to listen to God, right? And so they don't always grow in wisdom, but some do. And so part of this growth in prayer, God teaches later in the Old Testament, is that prayer is not just about speaking and saying words to God. Prayer is fundamentally about making relationships right with people around us. And so this shouldn't surprise us because if you have a relationship with your parents or your family or your spouse, you know that saying I love you is never enough. You have to follow the I love you with action.
So it really seems like relationship flows throughout all of Scripture. And maybe that's why communal prayer seems to be one of the primary forms for people to communicate with God. Because by restoring the relationship that we have with God, we begin to restore the relationship that we can have with one another.
Yeah, it's really well said. So to summarize then, I think what we've established is in the Old Testament, prayer is about restoring this intimacy with God and with each other, right? And so that when we want to have that garden perfection of walking with God again, even in a broken world. And so here are some takeaways I think we can walk away with from the Old Testament. The first is that it takes faith to listen to God. We have to ask ourselves how often we're listening to God rather than just speaking to him. God speaks to Abraham. He speaks to his people over and over. Second, the relationship will take the will to live righteously. We need to right relationship with each other in this world, and we have to get rid of the idols that hold us back from God and from each other. And third, it takes growth. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know how to pray all the right things. You have to just be willing to approach God. So if we turn to God, if we're willing to accept that relationship with him again, he's willing to walk with us again.